Get back from Europe or you're fired. The new VP screamed into my personal phone. I sighed. Okay. I just logged out. You have 20 minutes before the data center cooling resets to 0. Tell your dad to buy fire extinguishers. Good luck. I leaned back in my chair, the late afternoon sun, catching the edges of the vineyard outside. Lavender mixed with the earthy scent of old money, the kind that hangs heavy in the air in Provence. It was the golden hour, the moment that makes everything look a little more perfect, a little more glamorous than it really is. The light filtered through the rustling leaves, turning everything soft and warm. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the familiar knot of tension in my chest. My blood pressure wasn't threatening to explode in my ears. I was finally able to relax. The sound of my daughter Sarah, laughing at something her fiancé said, drifted across the table. I watched her face light up, her smile infectious. And for a brief moment, I allowed myself to be present. To be here, with her, not thinking about the constant buzz of work that usually followed me everywhere. Then my phone buzzed again. This time a furious, insistent vibration that practically rattled the wine glasses. It wasn't the polite ping of a text message or a reminder to take my vitamins. No, this was the kind of phone call that made your stomach twist. I looked down. 17 Slack notifications. 2 voicemails. And then, the face that made my stomach turn. Bradley, VP of Operations. Bradley, the owner's son. A man who thought the cloud was actual water vapor, and whose only qualification for running a data center was that he once set up a Roku without calling Geek Squad. I let it ring. I took a sip of wine, savoring the bold, rich taste. It tasted like freedom. The phone stopped ringing. Then it started again immediately. Mom, aren't you going to get that? Sarah asked, glancing over at me with concern. She knew the drill. She knew that when I said I was off the clock, I was actually just pretending. I was a systems engineer. I was the one who kept everything running. If something went wrong, it was always me who had to fix it. The internet didn't rest, and neither did I. Nope, I said, popping a grape into my mouth. I'm on paid time off. The O is the most important part. But the buzzing didn't stop. It was vibrating against the antique, wrought iron table like a wounded animal. I sighed. The kind of heavy sigh that comes from deep within, the one you only make when you've been on edge for far too long. I picked up the phone. Hello, Bradley, I said, my voice dead flat. I'm not joking, Paige. Get back from Europe or you're fired. He barked, his voice cracking like a teenager who just hit puberty. I didn't even flinch. You know, Bradley, I said calmly, swirling the wine in my glass. I can't come back. I'm 4,000 miles away. I'm at my daughter's engagement party. I submitted this time off 6 months ago. Your father approved it. I don't care what Dad did, Bradley shouted. The dashboard is red, everything's red. You need to log in and fix the flow rates or you're done. Pack your desk, now. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Bradley, I can't log in. What do you mean you can't? He sounded bewildered. I do have the laptop, I said, slowly, deliberately. But you revoked my admin privileges yesterday. Remember, you said, and I quote, we need to pivot to a more agile, youth-oriented hierarchy. You gave my keys to that intern, Kyle, the one who thinks Python is a snake. He's crying in the bathroom. Fix it. You're unbelievable. Bradley spat. Fix it, Paige. Now. I leaned back in my chair, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. I can't fix what I don't have access to, I said, as calmly as if I was discussing the weather. Brad, you wanted me out of the loop. Well, I'm out of the loop. I could almost hear the frustration crackling through the phone. Then get on a plane. If you aren't here in 12 hours, you're terminated for cause. Insubordination. Sabotage. The word hung there between us, like a thick fog. Sabotage. He wanted to talk about sabotage. I stared at the vineyard in front of me, the fields stretching out into the horizon, the peace of it almost making me forget why I was so angry. But then, I thought about the last decade. The missed birthdays. The Christmas mornings spent troubleshooting, server failures, while the world celebrated. The hair that had turned gray faster than I cared to admit. All of it was because of the choices I made to be the backbone of this company. And now, this entitled little brat was trying to tell me I didn't matter. Something inside me snapped. Not a loud snap, but a quiet metallic click, like the lock of a door finally clicking into place. Okay, Bradley, I said softly. Okay, what? You're coming back? He asked, a little too hopeful. No, I replied, coldly. Okay, I'm fired. You want to terminate me. Consider it done. I paused, letting the silence settle in between us. Then, I casually hit the button, logging myself out of everything. Slack, email, the VPN. Everything. It was the kind of thing I'd never thought I'd do. But at that moment, I felt a kind of freedom I hadn't known in years. You have about 20 minutes before the data center cooling resets to its default 0 state, I said. That's a safety feature I wrote to prevent unauthorized tampering. Since I'm no longer an employee, I can't authorize the override. Tell your dad to buy fire extinguishers. Good luck. The phone went dead. I powered it off and dropped it into my purse like a loaded weapon. Sarah looked over at me, eyes wide. Mom, is everything okay? I smiled, a real smile, the kind that shows teeth. Everything is perfect, sweetie. Pass the brie. But in my head, I was already counting down the minutes, feeling the rush of power, as I realized that for the first time in a long while, I had taken control. In just 20 minutes, everything would change. The phone went silent, and I felt the weight of my decision settle deep in my chest. 20 minutes. That's all Bradley had before the temperature inside the data center hit critical levels. I'd given him the warning, and now, I had no choice but to let the clock run out. The air around me felt cooler now, as though the vineyard itself was offering a momentary respite from the heat I knew was building back in Denver. The momentary calm made everything feel surreal. My daughter Sarah continued chatting with her fiancé, completely unaware of the internal storm I'd just unleashed. I took another sip of wine, savoring its complexity, its bitterness. I needed to enjoy this, because once that cooling system failed, it wouldn't just be the servers that burned. It would be everything I'd worked for over the years. But I was past the point of caring. Sarah caught my eye and smiled, her face glowing with the excitement of the engagement party. She was blissfully unaware of the chaos that was unfolding. I almost felt guilty for what I was about to let happen. But I quickly pushed that guilt aside. This was about more than just the data center. It was about me finally being heard. You're awfully quiet, Mom, Sarah remarked, her tone light as she leaned in closer. You okay? I met her gaze and forced a smile. I'm just fine, honey. Just a little tired, I guess. I wasn't tired. I was far from it. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. As the minutes ticked by, I could feel my pulse quicken, the calm exterior slowly cracking. I had played this role for so long, being the dependable one. The one everyone turned to when things went wrong. But I had never been allowed to be anything else. I'd never been allowed to make mistakes, to take a break, to just be. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, but I didn't pick it up this time. It was Bradley again, no doubt pleading with me to save his skin. Too bad. He had made his choice when he decided to push me out of the loop. Now, he would face the consequences of underestimating me. The warm breeze from outside tugged at my sleeves, and I couldn't help but look out over the vineyards once more. There was something about the way the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the fields, that made me feel both powerful and small at the same time. This was my moment to step out from behind the curtain. I can't believe this is happening, I muttered to myself. It wasn't just the company, or Bradley, or the data center. It was everything. The years of proving myself, of being the one to fix it all, and now, finally, letting go. I leaned back, taking in the view, letting the peaceful surroundings ground me in the present. This was it, no turning back. The phone buzzed again, more insistent now, vibrating against the table. I finally looked at it. Bradley had called several times in a row, no doubt demanding answers, but I was done with explanations. He wasn't getting one from me. Mom, you really should get that, Sarah said again, her voice more serious this time. She was no longer oblivious to the tension that had begun to build in me. Is everything okay with work? I shook my head, standing up and stretching my arms overhead. The tension in my shoulders finally eased. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world. I'll deal with it later, I said, trying to sound nonchalant, but Sarah could read me too well. She nodded slowly, but the concern in her eyes didn't fade. Just don't overdo it, Mom. You've been working yourself ragged for so long. It's okay to take a break. I smiled at her, trying to reassure her, but inside, I was already 1,000 miles away. The clock was ticking. 20 minutes, maybe less. The cooling system would fail. The temperature in the server room would rise, and those servers, those $1,000,000 machines, would start to melt. The data, the backup systems, everything we'd worked for would be gone. I felt a pang of guilt. But it wasn't the kind of guilt I had felt when I'd taken time off before, only to be pulled back into the fire. No, this time, it was different. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I wasn't just cleaning up someone else's mess. I had made my choice. And I was going to stick to it. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I turned it face down and pushed it to the edge of the table. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own fate. Mom, Sarah asked, still watching me closely. Are you sure everything's fine? Yeah, I said, forcing another smile. Everything is perfect, sweetie. And for once, I truly believed it. But as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder. What would happen when I got back to work? Would Bradley even be there? Would they all be scrambling, trying to fix the damage I'd left in my wake? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing: they would know my name. They would know exactly who I was. And when the dust settled, I'd be the one holding the keys to the kingdom. The phone buzzed again, the third time. I stared at it, almost waiting for it to stop, but it didn't. Bradley had already called twice. And now, here he was, coming at me from another angle, probably leaving a voicemail. Probably still convinced that I could just flick a switch and make everything right again. I glanced at the screen. The familiar picture of his face, flushed and stressed, lit up the phone. His calls had become more frequent, more frantic, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But I couldn't pick it up again. I couldn't let myself go back into that space, where I was the one doing all the heavy lifting, while others made all the decisions. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. My chance to finally step back, to show them all just how crucial I had been. I reached for the wine glass again. The sweet taste of the wine burned my throat, its tang still lingering, a reminder of the space I was trying to carve out for myself. The space where I wasn't just the problem solver, the fixer. I wasn't just the woman who ran on fumes and deadlines. I was more than that, and if I was going to make it clear to anyone, it had to start now. The phone vibrated again, shaking the table like a live wire, but I didn't flinch. I'd done my part. It wasn't my fault anymore if things went wrong. I'd warned him. I'd warned Bradley. This mess, it was his. All his. I heard Sarah talking again, her voice high and light, but I wasn't listening. Not fully. Her voice was a soundscape that felt so far away. I was already miles ahead in my head, running the scenarios of what would happen next, how long it would take before the inevitable panic set in back at the office. In my mind, I could already hear Bradley shouting at his team. I could hear him demanding answers from Kyle, the intern, the one who had no idea how a server worked beyond the basics. He probably wouldn't even know where to look for the cooling system's override, let alone how to use it. I had set that system up so many years ago, tweaking and fine-tuning every inch of it, but none of that mattered anymore. The ball was in their court now. I ran my finger around the rim of my glass, letting the smooth crystal catch the light. I didn't need to hear Bradley anymore. I'd been doing this for years, working tirelessly, solving one problem after another, dealing with breakdowns and meltdowns, crises that no one else seemed to see until the damage was done. I was the one who took on the weight when the servers went down or the hardware failed. I was the one who sacrificed personal time, my own well-being, just to make sure everything ran smoothly for everyone else. But not this time. Not anymore. The phone buzzed again, and this time, I didn't even look at it. The temptation was still there, though, to pick it up, to fall back into the routine. But I stopped myself. I took a deep breath and looked back at Sarah. She was still in the middle of a conversation with her fiancé, completely unaware of what was unfolding. How could she know? She didn't have to. I leaned back, finally letting myself relax for the first time in what felt like forever. The pressure in my chest, the constant hum of worry, had dulled. I hadn't realized how tightly I had been holding on to it, how tightly I had been gripping everything, until I let it go. The buzz of the phone finally stopped, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. It felt like the calm before a storm that was already brewing back at the office, but a storm I had no intention of being part of. "Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice pulling me back to the present. "Are you okay?" I nodded and smiled. But there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. Something beyond the office, beyond Bradley, beyond the data center. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years, the feeling that I was finally free to be something other than the person everyone depended on. "I'm good, sweetie," I said, my voice steady, but inside, I was already moving ahead. Just needed a minute. It was more than a minute. It was a lifetime in the making. I was done being the one who cleaned up after everyone else. The clock was ticking, and this time, I wasn't going to be the one scrambling to save the day. "Just don't overdo it," Sarah said, her voice soft with concern. She knew me too well, probably better than I knew myself. "You've earned the break." Her words landed differently now. I wasn't just trying to hold things together. I was starting to see that I had been holding myself together for far too long. I closed my eyes for a moment and let her words sink in, then opened them again, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. I was calm now. A little too calm, maybe. But for the first time, it felt like I could finally breathe. The next few minutes were going to be crucial. The data center was going to fail. The systems would crash, the heat would rise, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Not without me. I reached for my phone again and powered it off completely. It was a final step, a definitive action. Bradley had no idea what was coming. He had no idea how deep I'd planned this. In that moment, I realized just how much power I held in my hands. It wasn't in the systems, or the cooling protocols, or even in the data center itself. It was in the choice I'd made to finally take a step back, to let them feel the consequences of their actions. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the one picking up the pieces. I was the one who decided what happened next. And for the first time, that felt right. I looked at Sarah again, offering her a reassuring smile. But deep down, I knew that my real journey had just begun. The minutes seemed to drag on, stretching between me and the inevitable. I watched Sarah and her fiancé chat across the table, their voices blending into the background. I tried to focus on them, on this moment of peace. But I couldn't ignore the buzzing weight in the back of my mind. The data center was melting down in real time, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. I glanced at the clock. 12 minutes left. I took another slow sip of wine, savoring the burn as it slid down my throat. I had spent years working myself to the bone, always stepping in, always fixing things when no one else would. But that wasn't my role anymore. Not today. I had made sure of that. "Mom, you're awfully quiet," Sarah said, glancing at me. "Are you sure everything's fine?" I smiled at her, but the truth was, I wasn't fine. Not completely. I was feeling too much, and at the same time, not enough. I had given up something I never thought I would control. The control I had always clung to, the one that kept me in the driver's seat when everything around me felt like it was falling apart. Now, I had let go. And, as much as it scared me, I knew it was the right choice. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I replied, my voice a little too light. Just enjoying the moment. She gave me a long look, like she could see right through me. But she didn't press. I appreciated that. The phone remained silent in my purse, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused. But I knew better. Bradley was still out there, and he had no idea what was coming. The quiet was deceptive. The air around me felt still, but in my mind, everything was in motion. I could see the chaos unfolding in Denver. Bradley's voice would be getting more frantic by the second, his irritation growing with every second. The data center continued to overheat. Kyle, the intern who had no clue what he was doing, would be running around, panicked, probably trying to call me again. But it wouldn't matter. The system was beyond saving now. The clock ticked down another minute, and my pulse quickened. Part of me wanted to feel guilt, but there was no room for it. This wasn't about the data center or Bradley or the company anymore. It was about me. For once, it was about taking back what had been taken from me over the years. I wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore. I was the one in control. I closed my eyes for a moment, the image of the data center flashing through my mind. I could almost hear the whine of the cooling fans, the steady hum of servers, trying desperately to regulate their temperature. But it was too late now. The system was designed to fail if it was tampered with. I'd set that up myself, anticipating a moment like this. No one could override it without the admin key. And Bradley. He had no idea where to even look for it. I opened my eyes again, focusing on Sarah, trying to push the image of disaster out of my mind. I needed to be here, in this moment, with her. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't even flinch. I already knew what it would be, a frantic message from Bradley, probably asking if I had fixed it yet. His desperation would be thick in the air, and he'd be playing catch up. His arrogance finally catching up with him. I let the phone buzz once, twice, then turned it off completely. There was no going back now. I couldn't help him. I wouldn't. Mom, you're really not going to take that? Sarah asked, her voice still concerned. She was used to me working through everything, even when I was supposed to be off. I shook my head. No, sweetie, I'm done working for today. The weight of that simple statement settled over me. I wasn't just done working for the day. I was done working for them. I had given them everything for so long. Now, it was time for me to take back what was mine. My time, my peace, my power. I glanced at the clock again. 6 minutes left. I let the silence stretch between us. I wasn't worried anymore. I wasn't even stressed. In fact, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't known I needed. Sarah took another sip of her wine, oblivious to the ticking clock that threatened to destroy everything I had worked for. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I'd spent too long worrying about things that weren't mine to fix. Are you sure you're okay? She asked again, her voice soft. I nodded, smiling at her. This time, it was real. I'm more than okay, I said, my voice steady. For the first time in a long time. I'm exactly where I need to be. She smiled back at me, still not quite convinced, but happy to see me finally at ease. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. The countdown was almost over. Bradley had no idea what was coming, but soon, he would. Soon, they all would. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix the mess. I wasn't the one holding the pieces together. The world could burn if it wanted to. I was done, and for once, that felt good. I looked at my phone again. Another missed call. Bradley's name stared back at me, and for a second, I thought about picking it up, just to hear him scramble. To hear his voice crack, his words tumbling over each other as he tried to fix everything. But no. That wasn't the point. I had made my choice. The power I had been holding onto for so long was finally slipping through my fingers, but it was exactly what I needed. It was quiet, almost peaceful. The laughter from Sarah and her fiancé drifted to me like a soft melody, and for a moment, I was swept away by the calm. I looked at them, their joy so infectious, and felt a strange detachment. Here I was, a woman at a crossroads, finally letting go of the chaos that had been my life for so long. The phone buzzed again, harder this time, almost like it was demanding my attention. I picked it up, only to see another text from Bradley. This time it was short. To the point. Fix it. Now. I shook my head, the words almost laughable in their desperation. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. This was his mess. Not mine. Not anymore. He had pushed me aside, undermined everything I had worked for, and now, when the heat was on, he had nowhere to turn but to me. But I wasn't going to bail him out. Not this time. My fingers hovered over the phone for a moment, and then I powered it off. The screen went dark, and with it, a sense of finality washed over me. I was no longer connected to the company. I wasn't part of the mess anymore. I was free. I glanced at Sarah, watching her laugh at something her fiancé had said. Their light-hearted conversation seemed so distant, so removed from the mess I'd left behind. I couldn't help but smile. She deserved this. She deserved a mother who wasn't always fighting battles that weren't hers to fight. I think I'm ready for some dessert, I said, cutting into their conversation. Sarah smiled, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. Me too. Let's have the crème brûlée. I stood up and walked to the counter, feeling a strange sense of peace. The decisions had been made. There was no going back, no second guessing. The clock was ticking, and in a few minutes, Bradley would realize the gravity of what had happened. I heard my phone buzz once more, but this time, I ignored it. I felt a strange sense of calm as I set the phone down on the table, distancing myself from the chaos unfolding miles away. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. As I returned to the table with dessert, Sarah was still chatting, her voice light, filled with excitement for the future. And I felt, for the first time in years, like I might actually have one too. A future that didn't revolve around being the one to fix everything. The sound of my phone buzzing again was like a distant echo. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. Bradley would deal with it. They would all deal with it. Sarah and I dove into the dessert, and for a moment, I allowed myself to simply be. I was no longer the one holding everything together. For the first time, I could just exist. No expectations. No demands. No last-minute fixes. And as the minutes ticked down, I felt a strange thrill rise within me. It wasn't the thrill of victory, not exactly. It was something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was the thrill of freedom. The freedom to finally walk away and let everything else crumble. I let out a slow breath and smiled. This was my moment. Not just because of what I had done, but because of what I had finally allowed myself to feel. I wasn't just a part of the company anymore. I was a person again. The last few minutes slipped away like sand through my fingers, and I felt no regret, no second thoughts. I had made the right decision. The only decision. I looked at Sarah, her face glowing in the warm light of the evening, and realized that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The minutes dragged on, each one slipping past, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The weight of what I had done began to sink in. I had walked away. I had let them all feel the consequences of their actions. And now, there was no going back. I could almost hear Bradley's voice in my head, screaming at the team, telling them to fix it. But I knew they couldn't, not without me. My phone had been silent for a while, but I knew that wouldn't last. Bradley would be desperate. He would be calling anyone he could. Anyone who could fix this disaster before it escalated further. I could picture him pacing back and forth, trying to hold things together, with the flimsy authority he had been given. But I wasn't there, and I wasn't going back. I could hear Sarah's laughter in the background, the light, carefree sound of her enjoying the moment, oblivious to what was unfolding miles away. I tried to focus on her, on the happiness she radiated. But a part of me couldn't help but think about what was happening in Denver. The data center would be reaching critical levels soon. The temperature would spike, and everything would come to a halt. My hand drifted to my purse, where my phone rested. It buzzed again. Another message. Another plea. Bradley. But I didn't pick it up, not this time. The calmness that had settled over me was too precious to disrupt. Instead, I looked at Sarah. She was talking about wedding plans, asking me about the next steps, excited for what lay ahead. Her future was so bright, and in a way, that made me feel even more determined to keep my own future in focus. My life had always revolved around work, around being the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. But now it was time for me to take control, to step out of the shadows. I let the moment stretch, listening to Sarah's voice, watching the sun begin to set over the vineyard. The colors of the sky deepened, turning from gold to purple, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a vacation. This wasn't just about taking a break. This was about claiming my space, my autonomy. It was about saying no. About walking away from the very thing that had held me captive for so long. My phone buzzed again. I didn't even need to check it this time. I knew it was Bradley, probably in a panic by now. He would be blaming the team, blaming the lack of experience, blaming anyone but himself. The thought made me almost pity him. Almost. But then, the pity faded. The anger, the frustration, those emotions I'd been holding onto for years, finally found their release. I had given everything to this company. I had sacrificed birthdays, holidays, personal time, all to keep things running smoothly. But when I needed space, when I needed time for myself, they had taken it from me. Bradley had revoked my privileges, stripped away my power, and I had just let him do it. But not anymore. I'm done. I whispered to myself, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Done. It was a word that felt strange, but freeing. For so long, I had thought that everything depended on me. I thought I had to be the one to fix everything. To make sure the data flowed, that the servers stayed cool, that the system kept running. But now, I realized the truth. They could survive without me. I could step away. Mom, are you sure you're okay? Sarah asked again, her voice breaking through my thoughts. I nodded and smiled at her. "I'm more than okay," I said, the words finally feeling true. "For the first time in a long time, I'm exactly where I need to be." She looked at me, a little confused, but still reassured. She didn't know what was happening back at the office. She didn't know the storm I had just unleashed. But I wasn't going to burden her with it, not now. She deserved this moment of joy, this excitement. And I deserved this peace. The phone buzzed one more time, but I ignored it. It felt almost ceremonial, the final buzzer. I had already made my decision. The system was going to crash. The data center was going to fail. Bradley would have to deal with it. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of wine, the cool glass against my fingertips grounding me. The sun had set completely now, and the stars were beginning to peek out from behind the fading light. The world felt still. For the first time in what seemed like forever, everything was in its place. I had done my part. I had warned them. I had given them the tools to succeed. But in the end, they had pushed me aside. Now, they would learn just how much they needed me. And I would be the one to watch it unfold, from a distance, enjoying the freedom I had earned. In the back of my mind, I could almost hear the sound of Bradley's frantic voice, the panic creeping into every word. But that was his problem now. He was the one who had made the choice to push me out. He was the one who had underestimated me. And now, he would see exactly what that cost him. For once, I wasn't the one left scrambling to clean up a mess. It felt good. It felt right. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to be free. The minutes ticked by slowly. But the chaos at the office was beginning to feel more like a distant echo than a reality. I could almost imagine it, the frantic calls, the scrambled efforts to fix something no one could fix without me. But I didn't need to be there. I had let go. This was no longer my burden to carry. I glanced at Sarah, still caught up in conversation with her fiancé, and tried to keep my mind from drifting back to the mess I had walked away from. They didn't know. They didn't know how heavy the burden had been, how much I'd carried alone for so long. But they didn't need to. They deserved this moment, and I was starting to realize that maybe I deserved it too. I had spent years sacrificing for the company, working late nights, weekends, missing out on moments like this. But now, with each passing minute, I felt lighter. The tension that had weighed down my shoulders for so long was beginning to lift. It was a strange feeling, this kind of freedom. The kind that comes from knowing you've done everything you could, and now, it's out of your hands. But then the phone buzzed again. It was Bradley. This time, the message was short and sharp, "Fix it." I laughed softly to myself. I couldn't help it. How many times had I been the one to fix things? How many times had I been the one left to clean up the mess, while everyone else acted like nothing was wrong? Now, I was the one who had walked away. I had given them a chance to fix it themselves. The truth hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about a data center or a job. This was about me taking control of my own life, for the first time in years. I wasn't just fixing problems anymore. I wasn't going to let others dictate how I spent my time or how much I sacrificed. I set the phone down, ignoring the buzzing. The decision was made. Bradley could figure it out. He could call whoever he needed to, but it was too late now. "Mom," Sarah said. her voice bringing me back to the moment. "You've really been quiet. Are you sure everything's okay?" I turned to her and smiled, truly smiling for the first time in a while. "I'm more than okay, sweetie," I said, the words flowing out with ease. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I need to be." She studied me for a moment, like she was trying to figure out what had shifted in me. But she didn't ask any more questions. I was grateful for that. I sat back in my chair, finally letting myself relax. The warmth of the evening air felt like a gentle reminder that I had made the right choice. There was no going back, no fixing things that weren't mine to fix. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was okay with that. The buzz of the phone seemed far away now, distant and unimportant. I didn't need to know what was happening back at the office. I didn't need to feel that constant pull, the one that kept me tethered to a life I had been running from. The clock continued to tick, but it didn't matter. In my mind, I had already won. The burden was lifted. The world could burn if it wanted to. I wasn't going to be the one to stop it anymore. Sarah and her fiancé continued talking, and I let their voices fill the space around me. For the first time, I wasn't distracted by the chaos of my own life. I wasn't running from something. I was just here. And that was enough. Another minute passed. The phone remained silent. "Mom," Sarah said again, her voice full of concern. "You sure you're not worried about anything? About work or?" I looked at her, surprised by the question. I had expected her to be more worried, to sense that something was off. But instead, she was just checking in on me. "I'm good, sweetie," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm finally doing something I've needed to do for a long time. I'm just taking a moment to breathe." She smiled at me, clearly relieved, and I realized something. This wasn't just a moment of peace for me, it was a moment of peace for her, too. She didn't need to see me tied to a job that had drained me, to a world where I was always expected to be the one who fixed everything. I was letting go, and in doing so, I was giving her the space to breathe as well. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't even look at it. I didn't need to. I was done. I looked back at Sarah, at her bright eyes, and realized that this moment was what truly mattered. I wasn't going to miss any more of these moments for a job that had never truly appreciated me. As I leaned back in my chair, I felt lighter than I had in years, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I had made the right decision. The phone buzzed one last time, but I didn't need to answer. It was already over. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly. I groaned, reaching for it in a haze, and saw the screen flashing with multiple missed calls from Bradley. The message that followed was just as frantic as his voice had been the night before. "Call me. Now. This is urgent." I could almost hear his panic in the text. I turned the phone off again and let out a breath. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need to fix it. It was over, and for once, I wasn't the one scrambling to save the day. I had made my choice, and nothing Bradley said now would change that. I pulled myself out of bed and glanced out the window. The sun was shining bright over the vineyard, the same view I had watched for years. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't just a part of the backdrop anymore. I wasn't just the invisible worker keeping things running. I was someone who had taken control of her life, who had made a decision and stuck to it, no matter the fallout. I had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the freedom to step away from a job that had drained me, a job that had defined me for far too long. But now, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders with every breath. I spent the morning in a haze, wandering around the house, enjoying the quiet. I was no longer tied to the urgency of work. No more emails. No more meetings. No more emergency calls. For the first time in ages, I could breathe. But, of course, the world kept turning, and eventually, reality began to settle in. I had stepped away from it all. But I wasn't sure what would happen next. What would I do now? I had spent so many years in this constant cycle of stress and responsibility, always putting work first. Now that it was no longer in my hands, I was left to figure out what to do with myself. I had no answers yet. But I knew I was going to figure it out. One step at a time. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I took a deep breath and picked it up. This time, I was ready to hear the consequences. Paige, came the voice on the other end. It was Richard Sterling, the CEO, not Bradley. His tone was calmer than I expected, though there was still a hint of panic underneath. I need to talk to you about what happened yesterday. I sat down, letting the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. What happened, Richard, is exactly what I warned you about. I told you this would happen if Bradley kept running the show. He couldn't manage the system. He couldn't manage anything. There was a pause on the other end. We've made a lot of mistakes, Paige, he said quietly. A lot of things went wrong, but I need you to come back. Please. The damage has been done, but if we can fix it, we need you to help us. Your expertise, your experience, it's the only way we can recover. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, weighing his words. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to walk back into that office, to take control again, and fix everything. It had always been what I did. It was what I was good at. But was that what I wanted now? Richard, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, I'm not coming back. Not full-time. You can't just expect me to step back into that mess. I warned you. And you ignored me. I'm done being your fall guy. There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. I understand. We've lost a lot of trust. But we need your help. I'll make it right. I'll pay whatever it takes to make things right, Paige. I sighed, rubbing my temples. This wasn't going to be easy. But I wasn't going to let them continue to take advantage of me. I was done being a cog in their machine. I'll help you, I said, finally. But on my terms. I'm not coming back to the office full time. I'll consult. I'll fix what needs fixing. But I'm not going to be your employee again. And you're going to pay me what I'm worth. No more undercutting me. No more throwing me under the bus. Richard hesitated before responding. Deal. Good, I said, my voice firm. And Bradley, I want an apology. A real one. In writing. There was another pause, and then he said, You'll get it. I'll handle it. Thank you, Paige. I ended the call and set the phone down on the table in front of me. For a moment, I just sat there, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. I had agreed to help, but on my terms. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into the same mess. But as I sat there, staring out the window at the vineyard, I realized something. This wasn't just about the company or the data center. This was about me. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, and my time. The phone buzzed one more time, but this time, I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. The damage had been done, and I had taken the first step toward fixing my own life. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had made the right choice.